Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Bob Mendelsohn, and this is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Today we speak with Charley Woods from Nashville, Tennessee, and us about country music and so much more. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining me for this Bob's Your Uncle podcast, Season 1, Episode 26. Of note, the opinions are strictly my own and those of my guests. You can now find us and comment directly to us wherever you get your podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple iTunes, the list goes on, but I won't. We have a lot of topics to discuss, and even so, on the Bob's Your Uncle podcast, you are part of the show. We want to see and hear you, so please send us a message on Facebook or Instagram. We'll talk more about pickleball in the weeks to come, as well as wars and rumors of wars. Let's see where the spirit leads us. Whether you're at home, online, on the road with me in your headset at the gym, or out for your evening constitutional, wherever you get podcasts, that's where we will be. Thanks for being with us for these 18 minutes. Amanda McInnes is both my travel agent and one of the sponsors of this podcast, and it will help all three of us if you book your next trip with her, including hotel, flights, all things tourists. You want to know how to reach her? Use the URL shortener bit.ly, and you'll get to her phone and email. So type it into your browser right now, bit.ly/Amanda365, and you'll find her photo and all the information to contact her at travelpartners.com.au. Contact her directly for tours and flights and cruises and deals. I've used her for years. She'll give you great advice. Now, back to the podcast.
Don't know much about history. Don't know much biology.
Historical marker of the week. On this date in history, 23 August. Three things of note, all in the 20th century. First, in 1912, Gene Kelly, the American actor, dancer, and director, was born. Also, only a few years earlier, in 1903, at the 6th Zionist Congress, Theodor Herzl declares a Jewish state, which eventually becomes what we know as Israel. And on this date, in 1939, Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov and Nazi Germany Foreign Minister Ribbentrop create a non-aggression pact, and they secretly divide Poland between themselves, setting the stage for World War II. And that's the historical marker of the week. We've spoken about music earlier in Season 1 with Charlie Mitchell of St. Louis, with Brad Mayhew of Kansas, even last week with Rob Smith here in Sydney. And now we continue this 3 or 4-part series on music with today's guest, Charley Woods. She's a podcaster and a country music singer with deep roots in Nashville, Tennessee in the USA. You're really going to enjoy meeting Charley and the rest of this series as well. Charley, it's great to have you on the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. How's life today in Nashville?
It's great. I actually just finished with a marketing meeting. Basically, he's partnering with me as I promote and get ready to release my next album. So I just finished a meeting up with him, which is great.
Let's talk about a wide range of stuff. Your coffee break Facebook Live videos tell us that you like it when people check in with each other. It seems designed to be almost a mental health break. Let me ask, how are you doing today?
Thank you for asking, Bob. I am doing okay. To be honest and vulnerable, which that is also something that I really encourage on that live stream. I've had better days mentally, but I'm also preparing for a nice weekend trip at the lake. So there are good days ahead.
I hope that for you as well. You are a musician. We first met in Nashville, where you've lived almost all your life. You describe yourself as Americana folk artist Charley Woods. Expand on that, will you? What is Americana? Could that not also include Leonard Bernstein or composer Laura Zayer from Oregon or piano man Billy Joel? What do you mean by Americana folk?
Absolutely. I believe it includes a lot of different artists and composers and songwriters, even. Americana is one of those genres that really overlaps into basically any other music genre you can think of. I think if I could define it, it would be music that music that can be traced back to American heritage or North American heritage, but also that wouldn't sound bad if it were blended with other music that is derived from other different countries out in the world. It's one of those that when you listen to an Americana song, it just makes you feel at home.
Many of your fans, the Charlie Woods fans, and buyers of your EPs and albums know that you're also something named Charlie Lowry, a worship pastor at a local church in Lachlan Springs, there in East Nashville. What is a worship pastor?
That's a really good question. I would define a worship pastor as someone who partners with the Holy Spirit to usher God into a temple, a place of worship for a church and its members. Basically, I get to utilize my music director skills and lead a band in um, literally putting on a worship set every week, but also that's only really 30%, 20% of my time. The rest of the time is spent being a pastor of sorts. Um, I like to say a lot of times when you're a minister or a pastor, it simply means people is your job. Loving people and connecting people, building relationships, being the church as God would design it is my job. And I get the privilege of mixing it with music.
It's it's wonderful. In light of that, what do you see about Christian music in its progression? For instance, 100 years ago, that would be defined as sacred hymnody. What is Christian music today?
It's a lot of different things, Bob. Christian music today is also in a state of transition. There's a lot of influences that are popping up that really can be traced back to the early church. It can be that hymnody. We're really getting back to that in a lot of arenas in worship, but at the same time, it's the style of worship is broadening so much where there's now worship sectors that are influenced by rap and R&B. There's gospel, there's country Christian music, there is Americana folk indie Christian music, there's Christian pop, and each of those styles and micro styles are broadening within themselves. So worship music, I would say, is something that is just simply growing in style. Um, and we could talk for hours about what that repertoire is beginning to look
I'm
like.
happy to do that. We'll just only have 11 minutes on the podcast, but that's fine. Hey, Charlie, where do you think Christian music is going to be in 10 years? And will you be there too?
Goodness. I would like to think that Christian music in 10 years is closer to sounding like what it must sound like in heaven.
Hmm.
Because that I feel is really our job. I my job is to create a space, mainly auditorially, audibly, but also just an environment of lifting up the glory of God and sharing that and unifying that in a room with others. And if is worship music that people are continuing to write, where 10 years from now that's done more and more, I would be happy to be continue to be a part of it. As far as the music that I write, it's actually more. It can be considered more into the secular and commercial realm than it can the worship and CCM realm. But I like to say that ministry happens at all times, no matter where I am. If I'm playing an Americana show in St. Louis, or if I'm leading church on Sunday. It may sound a little different, but I would like to think that it's doing the same job within the hearts of people. And I think that's what worship is supposed to do. It's a work in the heart.
One day, my wife was listening to a country music radio station, and in the other room, I was listening to, as you said, CCM, a contemporary Christian music radio station. And the two actually were playing the same song. What does that say to you, if anything?
I love that. I think that it means we are crossing over boundaries and styles are starting to blend into one another. And, you know, if the message of the Lord and in my faith, the message of Jesus is one of love. And that's one of inviting others to your table. And if we are to visualize, radio stations being tables for people to sit and commune, why not people at each table commune with one another and that overlap start to begin? So I love that and seeing that happen. And I hope we see more of it in the future.
On this podcast, you should promote your own website and music. Now's a good time.
Yeah, I'd love to. So you can catch everything that's going on with me at charleywoods.com. And my name is spelled with an EY, CharleyWoods. I'm also on social media. I am Charley Woods is my handle basically anywhere. I also get into some trouble and some travel conundrums quite often and like to vlog those on YouTube. So if you hunt on the internet for Charley Woods, there's really no telling what you'll find, but hopefully in the near future, in the coming weeks and months, there will be an album or an EP or a single coming out very, very soon.
Uh, and you're a delightful lady. I really enjoy the church itself. I've enjoyed knowing you a little bit. I have two daughters who live very close to that church, and it is a delightful place. And you help stamp your persona in it. Uh, were you always a member of that church? Were you raised as a Christian?
I was not raised in the church, actually. I found the Lord and was saved, committed my life to Jesus when I was 14. I've been leading worship since around that same time. I fell into leadership very, very quickly. I felt the call in my heart. I didn't feel the call into vocational ministry until just 2 years ago. But I've been volunteering on worship teams and leading worship anytime, whether I'm getting paid to do it or not, since I was 14 years old. So going on 15 years, I'd
You don't
say.
have to tell us
Um,
exactly how many years. Charley, is there ever an argument? Is there ever a dialectic, a difficulty? Is there ever trouble between the paid staff and the volunteer band that you lead? You get paid to go to the same amount of rehearsals that they do, and
mhm,
they don't get paid.
mhm.
I imagine a pastor has that same difficulty. He gets to, or she, if there's a woman pastor of a local church, gets paid to preach and visit and do all those things that pastors do. But a volunteer Bible study leader or an associate superintendent of the whatever, they don't get paid.
Mhm.
Do you find difficulties in your relations with band members ever related to that?
I can say that having done it for as many years as I have, I've seen a lot, and I've certainly walked alongside others and walked through challenges where points of contention happen. We're all people, and people are flawed and broken, myself included. And I'd say that whenever there is a difficulty in when it comes to money and being paid for something as holy as church work or as righteous as ministry, whenever there's a conflict in that regard, it's actually not the money that's the problem, it's the heart of the individual. And that's also not a thing for me to say because I'm not a judge. So, it's one of those things that there's someone that I greatly look up to. His name's Carlos Whitaker. He's actually, he's a Christian speaker and influencer in the Nashville space, especially, but he has certainly influence worldwide. He says a lot of times people ask him, what are the things that you stand on? What do you stand for? And he always responds with, I don't stand on anything. I walk alongside people. And that's exactly how I see it. Every worship team, every church is going to be different because a church is a business, but what we do on a platform or beside it, inside or outside the church doors, is a work of the heart and should be loving others, and that should be what comes first.
Is there anything else you want to tell the Bob's Your Uncle podcast audience?
Keep listening to music. There's something that I say too on my coffee break show every day, and it's the concept of, if you think that you haven't arrived yet, you should probably change your perspective. So keep making and keep arriving, always.
How do people find your podcast?
Oh, you can head to my Facebook, facebook.com/I am Charley Woods. And also, if you head to my my website and sign up for my email list, I have free music that I give away to people, anyone that signs up, and I periodically send reminders when those live streams are going live on Facebook.
That's so great. Charley, it's a joy to know you and to share this time with you right now. And I look forward to seeing you, please God, in November when I get to come back to Nashville. God bless you.
I look forward to the same, Bob. You too.
Thanks. Every week we read from the #1 bestseller of all time, the Bible. Today, 1 Chronicles 15, verse 16. Then King David spoke to the chiefs of the Levites to appoint their relatives, the singers, with instruments of music, harps, lyres, loud-sounding cymbals, to raise sounds of joy. What do you think about all this? Write me on bobmendo@aol.com, or comment or even video to me if you want on Instagram or Twitter at Bob's Your Uncle PC. I'd love to know what you think about all this. Don't forget to post a review on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you're listening, and then share our podcast with your mates, your friends, your enemies. Thanks for helping us get known out there. Also, please follow or subscribe to the podcast and hit like as well. We can use all the good speak we can get. Don't forget to book all your travel needs, even in America or here in Australia, with Amanda McInnes at travelpartners.com.au. Next week, you'll meet Russell Torrance, morning presenter on Australia's ABC Classic FM breakfast show. He's originally from Scotland, moved to Manchester in the UK, and then finally made it here to Australia. He has a delightful voice and manner, and I listen to him almost daily. You won't want to miss this episode being released on the 30th. Until then, from me, Bob Mendelsohn, when things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in his heaven, and Bob's your uncle. Shalom from Sydney.